I'm Glenna Luschei. I'm delighted to be here on the happiest and most beautiful day of the year in Lincoln, Nebraska. And actually, I was born in Iowa along the Missouri River, and I grew up most of the time in Iowa, but I'm not just saying it because I'm happy to be here. But my happiest time was in Nebraska because our grandfather had a farm. He was a country lawyer who read law for his degree, and my grandparents lived in Beaver City, Nebraska, and I always felt well there. It was high and dry, and where I grew up in Ottawa, Iowa, it had the most fertile land in the world and produced the most corn and the most beans, but somebody in our house was always sick. So we went, when we were sick, we went to the sick room to get well, and that's where I wrote some of my first poems. And I think that's where we heard the stories about our grandparents coming across the plains. Yes, I did live in Lincoln. I was in graduate school here, and then when I came back from South America, I moved here with my 4 children and my husband at that time. And it was always such an exciting place for me with the state capitol and the university. Something always to do that stimulates your mind.
Great.
I think I'm happiest when I'm on a campus. I love going to school, and as a matter of fact, I have 3 degrees from here, from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. And then I went on to, when I moved to California, I went to the University of California at Santa Barbara and got a master's degree in Hispanic Studies, Languages and Literatures, and later finished my PhD there. Yes, I write a lot about farm country, actually. We grew up as corn and bean farmers, and I worked in the fields detasseling corn. And now I'm an avocado rancher in California. So I've been a farmer all my life. And I do write a lot about farming and growing. Well, my brother, John Stevens Berry, is here in the audience, and he always has encouraged me, and he's a writer too, and I published his first book of poems when I started Solo Press. And other writers who have influenced me have been the, I guess you would call them Midwestern writers when I was in South America. A friend sent me the first books of Robert Bly and James Wright, and I thought, well, they're writing about what I know. I can write like this. I don't have to write a Shakespearean. Okay. I think that's a big lesson for a poet, just to write in your own voice. It took me a long time to find my voice, but I do love the Prairie Schooner because I love the voice of the poets there. And I love the poems of James Wright and Robert Bly. It's when they first started writing, and I thought, I can do this too. My mother said that I spoke in iambic pentameter before I could find words. So I think I've always loved the sound of language, and I did write poems in the sick room, or made up poems. My daughter used to say, well, I just make up the poems, Grandma writes them down. So I didn't write them down, but I just made up the poems. And I think I always felt that calling. And I was really hooked in my 4th grade class when I wrote a poem and people said, could we hear that over? My classroom wanted to hear it over, so I read it over, and then they said, could we hear it for a 3rd time? And I thought, well, that really is a thrill when someone wants to hear it for a 3rd time. I'm not happy when I'm not writing, and I had a dream once in which our gardener told me that everything was growing up in weeds, and I think that's when I realized that I had to keep writing, so everything would have bear fruit. I think both happy and sad things inspire me. Grief. This latest book is a book to my husband. I lost him a year ago, and he loved coming to the Midwest with me, and so I'm glad to be back here to read the poems in tribute to him. And I also lost a daughter, and I composed poems for her, but also happy events inspire me too. Somebody called me a poet of ecstasy. I like that. I like to feel that my writing is inspired by joy. I think I write a lot about growing, a lot about farming. I always come back to those themes. I think I can work anytime, just when I'm breathing. I do believe that poetry is a love affair between the poet and the audience, and when you, in a successful reading, you feel that rapport pass between poet and the audience, and people leave, if it's successful, people leave better, feeling better than when they came in. And that you hope that's will happen and they don't feel worse. I want to get across how much I feel a part of them, and I'm happy to be there. And I'm also a medical translator, and I feel when I'm with a patient, their grief is my grief, and I feel that with an audience too. I think it's really important to connect with the writing community and to send poems to magazines and just set up a dialogue with yourself and the editor, and eventually someone will want to see what you have too. And I think it's fine to publish your own poems and give them to your friends. I just think it's important to keep the communication going. Right now I found a new title, which is Late for Prayers, because I have a bad habit of procrastination and getting to church late, and I think that maybe I can work on that and see what being late means and how much you lose by it or how much you gain by it. Yes, I have a list of poems. Gosh, it got so long. I'm going to have to cut it down. But I want to read from Which Dance First. These are the poems for my husband. And then concentrate on some poems from Nebraska. Startled to Wake is one. And gosh, I've got about 20 listed. I'm going to have to cut that down. And then I have another book, recent book out. It's called Salt Lick, and it's a collection of 40. It's a retrospective, 40 years of poetry.
My name is Meredith McGowan, and I am the curator of the Heritage Room. I'd like to welcome you to the Heritage Room and to the John H. Ames reading series. We're really excited that this reading has been around for more than 25 years at this point. The Ames readings are currently held, obviously, on Sunday afternoons at 2, on the third Sunday of the month. And I thank you for being here. And this is I'm trying to get to 200. I can't do that yet. It's 192. So next year we'll have 200. So hopefully some of you will be back for that too. And we are here in the Jane Pope Geske Heritage Room of Nebraska Authors. It is a special collection of books promoting and preserving works by and about Nebraska authors. I would say about 13,000 volumes in the collection now, maybe 3,000 authors or so that are represented. We also have information files, magazines, pictures, manuscripts. If you look around the room, you'll see artwork and other memorabilia from our author collection. So, and I also wanted to let you know that the Heritage Room is not tax supported. It is supported by the Nebraska Literary Heritage Association, and we'd like to thank the NLHA for the endowment that they established a number of years ago through their volunteer efforts. We also invite you to come back during our public service hours. We are open Tuesday through Friday from 12 to 3, and we're open on Sundays from 2 to 5. So actually, you are here during public service hours today. Excuse me. And the Ames readings are filmed every month on by 5 City TV. And if you're not here in the Heritage Room watching this today, and you are watching it on Channel 5, I just want you to know that we're on the 3rd floor of Bennett Martin Public Library, 14th and N Streets downtown. Anyway, our reader today is Glenna Luschei. She was born in Iowa, and I think she lived in Iowa for a while, but she also spent time in Beaver City and Lincoln, Nebraska. She currently lives in San Luis Obispo, California. She studied at the Iowa Writers Workshop, I believe, and the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and the University of California, Santa Barbara. She wears a number of different hats, so to speak, as a poet, an editor, and a translator, and probably other things that I've missed, I'm sure. She's also published the poetry magazines Cafe Solo and Solo, and she's definitely a supporter of the magazine Prairie Schooner. Glenna's written a number of books, most recently Witch Dance, which was published in 2010. We are very happy to have Glenna here with us today, and if you would please help me welcome her, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, dear friends. It's wonderful to see my old friends here and my new friends here. And Meredith, I really appreciate this beautiful room, and you're welcome. It's a thrill to be here on the most beautiful day of the year, too. I have 2 new books out. One is Witch Dance, and I will read poems from that first. And they are poems in memory of my husband who died last year. After a fall in our avocado ranch, and he always loved to come to Lincoln with me and drive through Iowa. And even though we're farmers in California, he'd never really seen a farmstead before or elevators. He was just thrilled to see agriculture in the Midwest. And so I know he'd really like to be here with me and see dear friends. He knew Ted and Hilda. He loved Hilda. And this is my brother, John Stevens Berry. And when Steve took us, the first time I brought Bill here 35 years ago, Steve took us out to dinner, and he ordered his very favorite, which was oysters. And I said, oh, no, you can't order oysters in Nebraska. So I changed his order to a beef. But when we got back to California, he ordered oysters. So. I would like to start with the title poem of Witch Dance. Witch Dance. Winter presses our hands in homespun mitts. Soft, autumn is over. We step the witch dance, dance of love and death. Terns feed at the lake on their flight from Nebraska, and rain bites the quince. Where are we going? Are those daggers of geese in the sky a warning? And I want to go on to read a poem about my waking up at my grandparents' farm in Nebraska. Startled to wake. I smell my grandfather's coffee and hear the hog futures on the radio. I smell the mash grandmother spread for the chickens. It's nearly time to help her gather eggs. It's nearly time to walk with grandfather to the post office. We open the box for letters, unsettle the hen for chicks. Now it's time for me to write letters, to marry, to bear my own children. It's autumn now, amazing to wake still on this rapturous plain, not yet winter. Headstone. And there's an epigraph from Robinson Jeffers. Headstone, touch you and Asia at the same time. We rest in peace, in eternal light, on a knoll above the avocado orchard. We overlook the Pacific, you in black granite, I in white marble, our ashes left before us. Who said we couldn't fly? And I want to read a poem for Halloween. Halloween Dream. Halloween Dream. One by one, the condors come into the pine branch, and we shoot them. Pellets enter pear-shaped bodies. At the end of the dream, they are extinct, and we mourn. In the pedal boat out in the lake, we recall the Day of the Dead in Mexico, children sitting on graves of ancestors in the churchyard, women in rebosos selling corn cakes, chrysanthemums in candlelight. Why do we forget our dead? In the half-light rowing home, children sent out in Halloween sheets. Generation after generation walks over the horizon. We take our place, single file on the limb, and month after month, we long for a child. Orchard. Morning sun pulls up the guy wires. The early spider tosses lines from avocado to berry vine. I plow up from underground in time for the seeding. How could I eat the pomegranate seeds? Why did I spend my life sleeping? I forgot to say on the interview, and it's an important part of my life, that I'm influenced by the Spanish and Portuguese poets that I studied while getting my doctorate at the University of California in Santa Barbara. I really love Federico Garcia Lorca, and the Portuguese poets too. For instance, Pessoa. This is about a summer Bill and I spent in Portugal. That summer in Lisboa, we opened the janelas above tiled rooftops and the statue, on the 7th floor where those chortling navigators could sail away with my pearls in the beak, or a crust of pau from the mesa. We left those windows wide open. Afternoon, we walked to the beer garden among the deodorus cedars, whose branches carry shutters wide open. The sign said, "Acaracóis," so we ordered sea snails and ate them with a toothpick. Evenings, we climbed to Bairro Alta, listened to the fado. We took the funicular down, home safe. Is it bad luck to ask how I deserve this perfection, a grace from leaving the windows wide open? Pruning. 20-inch pruning saw, first tool I ever bought to coax my ceanothus into shape. You could call this tool the new moon scimitar of Isis. 11 years of winter rain, I've been growing in a bramble with California lilac. Is a formal garden now in order? I'm willing to submit to pruning or to wildness. And I have to tell you about California lilacs. It's not at all like the beautiful, fragrant Nebraska lilac. It's something that grows in the mountains and doesn't have any scent at all, but it's sometimes lavender, and it's all we've got. I want to be your poet. I want to be the poet who invites you up the sweet-smelling stairs, my redwood home would welcome the traveler. Sun on pine needles, light through clearest stories. I want to be the poet who survives the night with you. Cricket calling, cough of the kit fox, rasp of the newborn word. I want to be the poet who will weep with you when it's time to leave, who remembers the burgundy of flowering plum. Flap, flap, blue jay in the bird bath. I want to be the poet who can kiss you awake. I'm not afraid of garlic breath. I'll deliver CPR. From your garden, I'll pull out an onion with a head like Einstein. Get ready for surprise. I'll whisk you through the silk and barbed wire. I want to be your poet, to be your lover. Here. Here, love's in the daily doings, the blister on the first roasting chile, the race to gather sheets at the wick of lightning. We fold the linen with lavender and sage. Love's the oar that draws us to the sea. You propel me over quick silver waves to San Luis Obispo. Through spidery hills of black oak, call me home. The mica I bring you scatters in my pocket, but the hunter moon tracks it to the tarmac. Why scan the moon's 2 continents for love? Our friends shout, look around. It's here beside us on the dark side. We fold the linen with lavender and sage. And Ted, here's a poem you published in a little almanac like 40 years ago. It's great to have immortality.
30 years.
It was 30, and what was the name of it?
The Windflower Home Almanac.
The Windflower Home Almanac. I'm glad to read this. Foolish one, over piles of bituminous coal, the bee gathers honey from vetch and yarrow. Foolish one to think that winter could ever come. The green poem. All these months I've lived in a rainforest, climbing the walls of trees like a vanilla vine. On top of each tree was another tree. I thought my umbrella was the sun. I'm out, taking long steps to meet you in my yellow slicker. Passing through sleep. And if you have any questions or comments, I'm used to talking because I've just had an interview. So please say them if you have anything. Passing through sleep. Your voices splash the mountain of my death. Lover, daughter, your questions arch like fish. The Egyptian priest balances voices. Yours are equal in sweetness and timbre. You will travel together. I, the canyon's sounding echo, lover, daughter, leave your dialogue, volcano and ash. I cross over the bridge of a phrase in no hurry, going to visit Iztaccíhuatl, loved for eons. Putting up firewood. The wood smelled of Yerba Buena. It grew there on long vines climbing the oak trees. I gathered it. You cut logs and loaded the pickup. I never got too far from you and a chainsaw, though that was before the accident. At home, I put Yerba Buena in the hearth, scattered some in linen sheets, and stripped off leaves for mason jars. I labeled other herbs Artemisia vulgaris for the wild turkey dressing, Baccharis pilaris for a sore throat. Before tragedy raised our lives, I made Yerba Buena tea. No cure, We never saw it coming. Okay. Live oak forest, and this is one that Hilda and James chose for a piece I have about Bill that's going to be in the Prairie Schooner in December. Live oak forest. Every morning of our lives, I squeezed your hand, and you squeezed back. Because I stole you, I had to check that you were there. That's when we explored the magic forest, and I feared for angry tribes. They would sever my hand. That's what they do to thieves. Once you lived in that desiccated forest of the oak moth. We brought the leaves to luster, the butterflies to monarchy. That night when I hydroplaned to the hospital, I feared to squeeze your hand. You might squeeze back. I might steal you and condemn us to eternal flight. But you were still beneath the muslin sheet. When they pulled it from your face, I adored your warm, freckled shoulders, as I always did, your oaken scent. Arrangement. It's 110 in Atascadero with oleander in full bloom, but poisonous. How could I change the arrangement of this bouquet? It's perfect, but I can't find the theme. The thistle is as lovely to remember as the Chinese bellflower, Atascadero, and iris on the lake. When I bring together silk and barbed wire, ferns curl about my fingers. I don't have a green thumb. I get by. In Colombia, we gave away orchids every day. The boy who sold us cheese, round and moist as the Colombian sun, and wrapped in a banana leaf, asked me for flowers in a jar. I have to bury my brother, drowned in the arroyo. I like it here. I belong. I pass the snapdragons. Stop to give them water. Well, I'm about finished with this book. Clouds of Cambodia. For my friend David, who gave me a place to stay when I was mourning Bill. Clouds of Cambodia. Clouds dwell like lovers over the Mekong River. We walk barefoot through the streets, splash through the jungle. I have no lover. The humidity draws me into a new life. I bathe in water from the Mekong and shear my long hair. The air is full of water and the river changes course. It's time for me to be reborn, to become a crone, to sweep the Buddhist temple with a broom made of twigs. In a cascade of rain, we observe the carvings of the creation, how two armies pull at Naga, the snake, until the sea churns in milk and all the creatures are born beneath it. Unicorn in Captivity. This is about the tapestries in the cloisters. Most of you have probably been there to New York, to the cloisters. Unicorn. Well, how many have you? You're nodding your heads. That's great. Unicorn in Captivity. The most arresting tapestry in the cloisters shows a unicorn confined to a flowering meadow. A circular fence holds her before a pomegranate tree bursting with seed. She will tempt me into the tapestry. Captivity was the best time of all, the chain of love around my neck like a wedding band. It started when the hunters entered the forest, the stag now tired and assailed by enemies. I would have saved you, but you were in a different tapestry. I was kneeling before a tall, white fountain when the 12 hunters found me. Pheasants and goldfinches perched on the ledge. The magic horn purified the stream. It's forbidden to disturb the unicorn while performing magic. Crossing the threshold of your tapestry, I would breathe you back to life. But hounds scouted the quarry. Converging lances peered my back, that old injury you would always rub. Desperate, I jumped the stream, attacked the hunters, and nearly tore a greyhound's body apart. They say anger is one stage before acceptance. They say the unicorn is tamed by the virgin, but that is a collusion between protectors and hunters. Grip. Your hand slips from mine like a salmon. Love of my life, where is your run? Is our course finished now that our spawn is done? Love of my life, death never loses a fish. But where is it taking us now? You upstream and me down? When I wake up with sand in my wrist, I know I've crept again to the sea, searching for your hand. Wheat straw. The tractors plowed me under the deep gray loam with shreds of pottery and arrowheads. Gone my yellow hair that sang to the trawlers. Epilogue. The willow-wahs stretch out today, spirit in the sky. Mergansers circle the shore. Everything takes wing on this autumn dawn. We guide the drift boat to your favorite riffle. Let the ashes go. Let you go. Swiftly turn. The osprey takes a dive, catches a trout. So I hope it ends on an optimistic note, that there's at least a trout. Well, I'd like to go on to the other book, Salt Lake, but what are your thoughts and comments and questions and observations about life or anything?
I have a question about the linen, and you mentioned a couple of times folding the linen with herbs and lavender and sage. Is that solely for the scent, or?
That's what I always, my grandmother used to do that. Maybe I picked that up from her. Did any of you do that? Fold your linens with herbs? Or Nancy, do you remember that?
I remember hearing about it. And I never grew lavender, but a lot of that is coming back. They have the lavender spray, and they suggest spraying the linens, particularly your guest bedroom.
Yeah. And so since this is kind of a memorial to my husband, and also linens like our death wraps, and so that was my thought. What were you going to say? Yeah.
Glenn, could I hear that Yellow Hair and Trawlers poem again?
Sure.
Just a couple poems back.
I think I might be able to say it. If I can't, I'll find it. The tractors I'll start again. The tractors plowed me under the deep gray loam with shreds and pottery and arrowheads. Gone my yellow hair that sang to the trawlers. I never knew whether to say shreds or shards, which is more correct. Which do you think? I have shreds in one edition and shards in another one. Which do you think, Ted? Shreds?
Shards.
Shards is more accurate.
There's one more vote for shreds. I like the more unconventional.
Yeah, that's true.
I just to let you know, it's not unanimous.
Yeah.
I rather liked the shift from the conventional formulas. Sorry to confuse matters.
Thank you. Susan?
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your use of color. I think partly because, myself included, everyone I've ever known who had the chance to live in California, suddenly the colors everywhere seem different. And that's something that I think is very appealing about your work with Portugal and also in California. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about using color in your work?
Well, I think that is a very, your uncle said that?
No, I lived in California briefly. It's just that everyone I've ever known who lived there came away with a kind of sense of color that was different than in other parts of the world.
When I visited in Nebraska during the winter, when I come back, it's just like I have to wear sunglasses. Everything is so bright and so vivid. And there's beauty here, and then there's a different kind of shocking beauty in California. And you have to get used to it.
Glenna, also, when you were 17, you were a very good painter, and you painted at the Sioux City Art Center, and some of your paintings were exhibited. And so I think that maybe you have had a sense of color for a long time. And while you're standing up there, I want everyone to know that when you were 17, you were also chosen to be the conductor of the All-State Orchestra.
If only you had instruments now, I could reenact that time in my life. But I'm glad that my brother is only telling them positive things, because I'll get to a negative thing. Did you ever have your mouth washed out? You deserved it, but...
Well, I occasionally was criticized for my language, but unlike you, I was never criticized for racing the freight train with my horse.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I raced, and the Iron Horse won on that one. Well, you mentioned colors and paintings, and I would like to tell you about a recent experience that was fun. I picked up a magazine on the airplane that told about San Luis Obispo, my hometown, and its vineyards and yellow hills. They're still yellow at this time of year, waiting for the rain, and also the Plain Air Festival. And it was last week. I participated in it. That was the day that San Luis Obispo was the hottest in the nation. It was 115 degrees. And I went out with a painter, and she was so absorbed in her work that I don't think she minded when I left for some shade. Under the dawn, buttermilk sky, we come upon that winding road which leads us to a new season. All voyages require preparation, and this one commands an easel, camp stool, a case of pastel nubs arranged by color, jewels out of the Arabian Nights, a parasol for the fierce sun, and a camera. Every traveler carries a camera, even a painter, or especially a painter. She was always going like framing her paintings. We watch the sun break through a cloud. The poet claims this is the most beautiful time of year. Oak trees backed by golden hills. The artist spikes the gray on canvas mountains with orange and yellow pastels. She said, on the foreground, more intense colors. Move back, colors get softer, gray. If it waits too long to rain, the hills will all turn brown. Rain is coming to bless us. We can smell it, feel it, prickle on the skin. Rain will not desert us, old friend from far back. Something about to happen. That road holds promises for us. We enter it together. Many layers of pigment signal along life. Each stop more pastel. No turning back. Everything will change on the coastal ridge. We will not be the same as when we started off. We enter Reservoir Canyon Road, where the rains will fill, our dreams will overflow. It has the capacity to hold all we desire. The artist says the road leads us back into the painting. She paints into the morning. The poet takes her leave from the campsite, the easel, the stool, the jars of fluid, the parasol of the camera, and that beautiful box of pastel jewels. Light-hearted, the poet skips away with only a number 2 pencil and 1 piece of paper. So I really love to work with artists. I have done that several times, and Margaret and I are planning a show in Santa Fe next summer with her encaustic art, interpreting some poems. And you're all invited, so look at my website, and Margaret's website. Keep in touch with us then. I'll go on to the next book for a few minutes. Here's kind of a fun poem about when I used to work for Carl Shapiro. He had a secretary who couldn't type. That was me. I haven't found it yet. Well, until I find it, I will look for another one. I somehow have the page numbers down all wrong. But we were talking about having our mouths washed out, and I was delighted when I saw William Klefkorn's book with the soap on the cover, and he was so, well, I guess I was luckier than he was, because he got his mouth washed out with lava soap. Remember that awful gray soap? But they chose Ivory for me, so I am more privileged. And I think it probably happens to anyone who loves words and doesn't want to confine themselves with just the proper words. Ivory. Not just any old cracked bar from the bathroom sink, but brand new soap wrapped in hospital blue and white was offered up for the ceremony when they washed out my mouth. I felt soap soft as cattleya petal on my tongue before I ever dreamt of the orchid, alligator pear, or elephant tusk world outside the Iowa snow. I demanded a baby doll that could piss. I couldn't let it alone. I want her to piss, until soap was the only solution. In the oral sex impeachment war, piss has lost some punch. Nothing beats it for fragrant, steaming grate or saffron snow. I'm proud that at the age of 4, I went to the mat for this word. And I'll read Rain Dance. And this is for Hilda because it's got some southwestern imagery in it. And we share this common love of the Southwest. I hope you'll come to our show and maybe read a poem. Yeah. Rain Dance. 20 years of waiting for him to apologize, to ask me to dance. I ask him. And we danced at our son's wedding to his Mexican beauty, 2 hours with the mariachis, all night with DJs, salsa, merengue, samba, cha-cha-cha. Even to smoke gets in your eyes while the machines threw out smoke. And on the bronzed California hills, it began to rain as in the green corn dances at Zia Pueblo. It rained down mud hens, kosharis, crickets, lightning bugs, and lightning. The wall broke into wet, crumbling adobe. Our grandchildren slid down the berm like salamanders. And I forgave him, understood why smoke got in my eyes, why lovely things die, why I loved him. The shine on our children's faces when they saw us dancing made me grieve for our estrangement. Our children with splits in their heads like Frankenstein's monster would not heal, become whole, until I merged with the other half of the nucleus. I grieved that I withheld this piece from them. And we danced in the rain until dawn, until the bride was green with dollar bills. This is Our Four Corners, and I use the epigraph from Robert Bly. Whenever there is water, someone is drowning. Friends, consider that we have always lived under the narcosis of water lilies. This room is the aquarium, and we are all dreaming within it. Remember how our teachers held us until the sun lit up seaweed in the late afternoon? Afterwards, in the castle, bride and groom, we never questioned our four corners. When the Buddhist master married us, he said, "You cannot love anyone in this life you have not loved in your first body of water." That is why we come in different shapes and sizes. There is room in the anchor. When you remember someone, she has always been there. When you lose someone, he is treading water near you. Here's another poem about loving words. You can't turn it back. Once you start turning, you can't turn it back. That painful afternoon, I persuaded my kindergarten teacher to march the class to the chickpea garden. In the morning, it sparkled yellow, blue, lilac, and pink. When we got there, all the blossoms had withered under heat. No one would ever believe me again. Decades later, I learned the word ephemeral. Grab it when you can, and the word inexorable. Once set in motion, it won't turn back. The Model T wasn't going too fast. Tippy wasn't chasing it, but he got caught under the wheels. He hightailed it back to the yard and died in my arms. I couldn't do anything but watch it all play out. That bright morning when my children and ex drove off for Alaska, the man who broke up my marriage and I strolled through a field of chickpeas. All of a sudden, he vanished. Scared, I discovered him hiding face down in the vines. What a jerk! But what has been started must be played out. Well, I'm almost done. Any requests or comments or ideas for the future? In the interview, I said my new venture is writing a book called Late for Prayers, because it's to deal with my lifelong habit of procrastination. And I don't know if you can be late for prayers, as they're always with you. And Steve, about that poem I read about Tippy, you remember our dog Tippy? But do you remember when you painted the cat green? And the tricycle cat and everything else green. We had a wonderful childhood. Oh, I have to read the poem for Tom McGrath before I finish. He called me Oatmeal Protestant, for Thomas McGrath. How many of you knew him, had class with him, love his poetry? He called me Oatmeal Protestant. I came to him in nakedness. I confess that on the way home from school I loitered while the others raced ahead. He knew I slipped into the Catholic Church to trace my hand in holy water, sniff the incense, and adore the statues. I only viewed such beauty through the Buddhist caves and National Geographic. He knew that I loved beauty and joy above all else when that sullen poet compared me to Doris Day. Condemned to happiness and blondness, he put his arms around me. He said, "Quit revising. Only God and Satan are pure." He knew that joy comes from surviving the tomb. He said the Irish would rather die than not fight. Lazarus laughed when Jesus brought him back to life. Already Tom could see death seeping into mine. I came to him in nakedness. I loved worldliness. His union protest blacklisted him in Hollywood. The wobbly members and overhauls who drove their campers to hear him in Port Townsend ate from cans around the fire, his royalty. He spoke of how our people moaned as they died from hunger in the potato famine. During those times, Protestants served us oatmeal on Sunday, provided we stay on to church. Who would not convert? As my poets in prison say, you can't beat 3 hots and a cot. Later, my family became Methodist and obeyed John Wesley's injunction to do what is shameful, to visit prisoners and patients in mental hospitals. Tom McGrath, father and priest, visited all of us. I came to him in nakedness. When he took me to bed, he called the next day, early, in time for morning mass. Well, about the end of the book, I have to read Root Beer Float. And it's even here. Root beer float. First time in 60 years I order a root beer float. I'm old enough to get what I want. I want to slurp it in private, but this man construction worker plops down beside me. I slurp, he moves. Good. I ask the soda jerk for another squirt. I'm old enough. This construction guy takes out his book to highlight passages. Sorry I made him move. Finally, what are you reading? A Buddhist history of time and space. Oh, that's what I wanted to read. I'm old enough. Another squirt of root beer. I hope you enjoy time and space. Hope as much as you enjoyed your root beer. One last slurp, bottoms up. I paid my bill. So thank you for being with me today.